Tonight on Command School, is your enemy up to no good? We've got some tips on how to scout out the opposition. Plus, in preparation for Red Alert 3 and its emphasis on unit special abilities, we'll show you some alternate attack modes in both Kane's Wrath and Red Alert 3. And we'll pay a visit to the War Room for some real-life tactics you can use in-game. Pay attention, soldier. This is Command School. You're watching Command School. I'm Greg Kasavin. I know you've all registered for the Red Alert 3 beta, but since you might not have gotten in yet, I've got some great tips for Kane's Wrath that you can use when you get your hands on the beta. Unit micromanagement is key in Red Alert 3, and using special abilities and controlling your forces in Kane's Wrath can really give you the upper hand too. But first, what's the best way to defend your base from an overwhelming attack? Knowing that it's coming in the first place. For this, you need to scout. We'll show you the best ways to stay on top using scouting strategies in For Noobs Only. 10,000 credits worth of Scorpion tanks can easily be countered by 5,000 credits worth of rocket troops and hammerheads, and you won't even lose a single unit. The proper counter can really put you ahead of the game. So before you take those 30 seconds to build that refinery, drop a barracks instead. While the refinery is building, pump out some troops and use them to explore. This will give you a chance to see what your opponent is up to and find out where he may be trying to expand. Send a couple of riflemen to any TIB spikes on the map to hunt for lone engineers. This is a cheap, easy way to slow down your opponent's economy early on. Also, hide a couple of troops in uncommon spots near enemy lines. Troops near TIB fields will easily be spotted by wandering harvesters, so hide them out where your opponent isn't likely to send units. Once you've set up a forward observation post, feel free to send in a unit or two into your enemy's base to find out what he's got coming out of those factories. Now that you know what buildings and units he's cranking out, start making your counter units. For example, if you see 2 airfields and no barracks, you can safely assume he's going to be concentrating on air units, so build some anti-air. Attack bikes and pit bulls are cheap air counters, and don't forget about base defenses too. On the other hand, if you see 2 war factories and no airfields, better get those rocket troops ready. Scouting's not just an early game thing either. Send some fast vehicles behind enemy lines every once in a while. It's worth a few credits to know what's going on. For a more permanent scout, use something stealth, like a sniper team or stealth tank set to hold fire stance. So remember, if you don't know what your opponent is doing, you're going to be caught by surprise. So scout them out and build counters. And if you want to be even more efficient, use your counter's special abilities. Here are some cool alternate attack modes in Casual 1. In Red Alert 3, every single unit will have at least 2 distinct abilities, and the use of these abilities will be tantamount to your success. But most units in Command & Conquer 3 also have abilities that can really turn the tide of war. Let's take a look at some alternate attacks in both CNC 3 and Red Alert 3. In Kane's Wrath, the Zocom Shatterer is a great unit. Its sonic attack is extremely powerful by itself, but the Shatterer has an even more powerful activated ability. Kick it into overdrive and the Shatterer charges up its weapon to unleash a potent sonic blast. It'll become immobilized shortly after firing, but who cares if you can't move when all you're up against is a bunch of scrap metal. That's a good tie-in for the Wave Force Artillery, a new Empire of the Rising Sun unit in Red Alert 3. It's a heavy artillery vehicle with a gigantic charging laser. The Wave Force is a slow-moving, slow-firing unit, but its charged-up artillery blast will pretty much decimate anything it hits. You can fire the weapon prematurely using the Wave Force's special ability, but it'll only do a fraction of its fully charged damage. This can be a good way of finishing off any weaker forces that manage to escape the full blast attack. Back to the Tiberium universe, we've got the Nod Enlighten. They're simple machine gunners on their own, but when you use their secondary ability, they're an effective vehicle counter as well. When activated, the Enlightened unleash an EMP blast that powers down all vehicles and structures it hits. This is a great way to counter epic units. The Imperial Shinobi is another unit in Red Alert 3 with a very cool special ability. The Shinobi is sort of like the Japanese version of the Allied spy, in that he can infiltrate enemy structures and cause all sorts of bad things to happen to the enemy's base. However, unlike the Allied spy, the Shinobi can't disguise himself as an enemy unit, but instead he can attack with his throwing stars and trusty sword. This stuff makes him almost as tough as a commando when fighting enemy infantry. If the Shinobi gets into trouble, that's when his special ability comes in. The smoke bomb sets up a smoke screen around the Shinobi that makes all attacking units lose him as their target, potentially allowing the Shinobi to get away. Let's also have a look at one of the most notorious CNC air units. The Skrin Planetary Assault Carrier is a flying death machine on its own, but check out its secondary ability, the Ion Storm. The pack will generate an ion storm around itself, which boosts friendly aircraft's attack and defensive power, making a Skrin aerial assault that much more overwhelming. We've got one more unit to check out this time around, the Red Alert 3 Allied Assault Destroyer. The Assault Destroyer is one of the Allies' most powerful units on the high seas, or on the ground for that matter since it's amphibious. It can blow most other ships out of the water, as well as rampage stationary units on land. Alternatively, switch on the Assault Destroyer's black hole armor to draw in any enemy fire in the area and boost the destroyer's armor. This protects any nearby units by sucking in enemy attacks close to the destroyer, deadly and defensive. So keep on practicing your micro skills and special abilities because you're going to need them. Now it's time to brush up on your map terrain with an in-depth look in Battleground Reconnaissance. Tournament Desert Redux is a ranked 1v1 yellow zone map with a huge green Tiberium field in the center and 2 narrow flanks on either side. There are 10 garrisonable buildings inside this TIB field. Skrin infantry are healed by Tiberium, so they have the most mobility on this map, but they lack any garrison powerhouse units. Nod and GDI, on the other hand, have the best infantry for garrisoning, but they'll be heavily damaged on their way in. If you're playing against Nod or GDI, expect a lot of tanks and aircraft mid-field with infantry flanks on either side. If your opponent is Skrin, try to grab those garrisons fast to limit his mobility. Don't forget about the TIB spikes in either side flank. Death Valley is a 4-player map with lots of bottlenecks. You start on a small green TIB field, and directly between you and each of your neighbors is a TIB spike. With very little economy on this map, capturing and holding those spikes is critical to your success. There's a large green field in the center of the map, but the area around it is very rocky and hard to get to. As a result, expansion bases won't be directly against this Tiberium. As starting fields run dry, lots of harvesters are going to be converging on this last resource. Because of the bottlenecks, you can only easily attack your 2 neighbors. You'll need to wipe one of them out before you can attack the enemy across the map. In real life, knowing your battlefield is a huge advantage. Let's learn some other real military strategies in the War Room. Military advisors constantly use tried-and-true strategies to their advantage, so why not use some of those same strategies in a video game that's all about combat? Let's take a look at some real-life military formations and how you can use these to your benefit in-game. First up, we've got Move to Assault. In the real world, the fastest way to move a large army is in a straight line. Tanks lined up single file, or maybe 2 in a row, and then infantry lined up a few soldiers deep on either side. In order to protect the vulnerable line, small mobile flanks travel on each side of the line and aircraft travel behind. In-game, this would mean protecting your main attack force of heavy, slow-moving tanks and infantry with mobile flanks composed of quick-moving units such as stealth tanks. These speedy units can take care of any scouts while the heavy tanks move into position. And here's one more for you. There are certain weapons in Command & Conquer that are going to deal splash damage to friendlies, such as the Vertigo Bomber's bombs. To prevent this, your airstrikes should come parallel to your line of troops, not from behind. So if your troops are attacking north, your bombers should come from the east or west, flying over the enemy and parallel to the front line. This way, the cone of fire from your air unit's payload will fall on your enemies rather than on your own units. Now that we've let real military pros help out your game, let's have CNC pros help you out in Command School Honors. Tonight's strategy was submitted by my good man Rich Chap, a little number he calls Across the Pond. When playing on Tournament Coast or Coastline Chaos, you'll often see lots of conflict around the garrisons and expansion fields in the center. What if you could avoid that altogether? Skrin players could do this at the very start of the match. Drop a refinery and pack up your drone platform, then fly it across the pond to your enemy's TIB spike. Build a portal, grab the spike, and amass an infantry army. Your opponent is going to be too busy trying to control the midfield while your troops attack. Nod and GDI players can join in the fun too, but it's more of a mid-game tactic. Once you have an airfield, build a surveyor or emissary and call for transport. Fly it over to the spike, deploy, and build a barracks. Grab the spike and send some rocket troops into the enemy's base, bypassing the contested midfield altogether. Thanks for the tip, Rich Chap. If you have a great strategy, send it over to commandschool@ea.com, and maybe you'll see it featured here. For the final lesson, we turn to the GameReplays.org Tip of the Week.
The Tip of the Week, brought to you by GameReplays.org.
You have a lot of useful information at your fingertips with the CNC interface. You probably already know that pressing the Q key will select all units on the battlefield, but you can also deselect specific unit types by right-clicking on them in the contextual tab. This is helpful if you want to send your main force straight ahead, but flank with your commando or some bombers. Just deselect them. The UI is also great for activated abilities. If you have a group of the Enlightened, for example, you don't want them all to bust out with EMP together when just one would be sufficient. Select all your Enlightened, then single left-click on one of the Enlightened and activate the EMP blast. Now only that unit will use the ability. The contextual tab is also a great way to keep your units alive. When you have a single type of unit selected, you'll be able to see the health of your units in the tab. But it can be difficult locating an individual injured unit on the main screen, so look at the tab to find out which ones need repair the most. Double-click on the injured unit and order it back to safety. Our interface also lets you set up basic unit formations by holding down both mouse buttons. Unit formations give you some quick control over which types of units get put on the front lines and which can deal damage from longer range. In general, your formation should have your epic unit out in front, followed by the heavy armor, artillery, and then infantry. Hover your air units in the middle of your army. Also, using the formation move command to move your army makes the selected group travel at the speed of the slowest unit in the group in order to keep everybody together. This is a great way to escort weak units or prevent speedy units such as pit bulls from outpacing your heavy tanks. And that's all I've got for you today. So be sure to try out real military formations and use the in-game unit formation function to help you out. In the meantime, always be scouting your enemies so that you can build the proper counters. You never want to be caught by surprise. And make sure to brush up on your micro skills, as you'll be needing those when Red Alert 3 comes out. Dev tested, player approved. For Command & Conquer TV, I'm Greg Kosofsky.